Cardi, Diddy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the KillJoy Jake podcast. Today, we're talking a little bit about the Final Destination franchise with Sarah Campbell. What's up, Sarah?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Me too. I love talking about this franchise so much. I don't get to do it a whole lot on my main page, so I'm so excited. This is going to be a really big blast. I can't wait for it. I got to ask before we get into this, what are your thoughts on the overall just franchise itself?
I think it's a really fun idea. There may be other movies like it, but it was like a unique concept to me when I saw the first one. And like with the exception of like one entry, it's a very consistent franchise. So I think like people don't talk about it enough.
I totally agree. I really do love it. It's to me it really bridges the gap between like your Scream style slashers and like just something like Saw. And I love that. It's like here's this weird middle ground where you have the gory kills, but you also have like the stylistic characters of the time. It's fun. It's a very fun franchise to go through. And oh, I can't wait to get to that bad one that you're talking about.
Yeah, that one was rough.
But starting off with the first one, we're still pretty good. Still pretty solid entry here. Final Destination from the year 2000. What are your thoughts on this one, Sarah?
I have a special place for this one, even though it's not my favorite of the franchise, but it like really brings me back to like that year. It's like the big stars were in it. Like Dawson's Creek was super hot. So like Kara Smith is there. It's just Michelle Williams. So it's very, I know I say this a lot when I talk about like 90s and 2000 movies, but like of the time, like it's one of those movies that you go back and everybody's wearing like short sleeves over long sleeves. It's that like angsty 90s, 2000s feel. And I love it. The acting is like very like dramatic heartthrob CW, but like I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of these movies have that. It's a bit of a charm to it. You know, it is a little campy, it's a little cheesy, but it's countered with some pretty brutal and upsetting deaths that a lot of them, and we'll get to some of the other stuff in the other movies, just stick with you. You know, like some of them are really upsetting and do feel real. I think my biggest criticism of this first movie, though, is that I do love the characters, but there's a lot of like death acting like a slasher villain, like cleaning up his tracks and all that, and it's a bit too weird and too supernatural for me.
Yeah, it's like in retrospect, I feel that way. Like I'm sure seeing it the first time, I was like blown away, but then you see how they handle some of the kills in the other movies, and then you go back to the first one and you're like, yeah, Death is really going out of his way to make this work.
I mean, I'm not to say that the other movies aren't ridiculous with the way that they're set up. You know, there are some things where it's like, this is a stretch, man. But I think my thing with this one that it feels like there's a lot of messy ideas all put together about how death works, and it doesn't necessarily feel consistent. You find that throughout every entry of this franchise too. Like, I don't feel like the rules are ever consistent in any of these movies.
No. You have to take all of it with just a grain of salt and just like enjoy the ride.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this is a franchise to be enjoyed with maybe a little bit, maybe your mind out of the space. Like, you can't overthink it too much. You kind of just gotta go with the flow, have fun with these movies, and that starts right from the beginning. But I do love these characters. Getting back to that, Devon Sawa is in this first one. Fails to appear in any of the other movies though, which I think is strange. He's a very big, strong part of this first one.
Yeah, and he like loves the franchise. Like he wanted to like come back and make cameos. So I don't know if like when they made the second one, they just like didn't foresee like longevity and they never invited him back for it, because that would have been the time. Like, don't kill him off camera, like invite him back. So yeah, I'm kind of wondering what went down there.
It's strange because he gets killed with a brick off screen between movies. Is how they explain it in the sequel. And the character of Clear Rivers. What am I even saying? Is it Ali Larder that plays her off the top of my head? Yeah, she comes back. So it's like, why is Devon Sawa not here? What's going on? This would have been fun to see him come back, or just get killed on screen at the very least.
Yeah, like have that be part of the opening. Like, I don't know, but yeah, I found it weird that they didn't bring him back when he was so vocal about wanting to be a part of the franchise.
Absolutely. I also, getting back to the kills too, I love the kills in this first movie. That was something that kind of surprised me. I forgot about a lot of them. The train one was one that stuck out to me big time on rewatch that I just like totally forgot about. Like, dude gets a piece of metal from the car or whatever shot through his head, and just like the whole top part of his head falls off. It's great. How do you feel about the kills in this first Final Destination?
I do like them. The one specifically that I find a stretch is the friend who gets strangled with the fishing line in the shower. That one's
Yeah.
like a little. They even touch on it, like who hangs themselves in the shower, like. But I find that one a little weird. But the rest are pretty fun. And the one thing I will say about the kills is, I'm not like big on gore, but for whatever reason, it just works here because it's kind of like a ridiculous premise that I don't get grossed out the same way I get grossed out when you like think of people being like in pain or like a Saw movie. It's just like these are just like over the top fun kills. They're usually pretty instant too, which I think is why I'm okay with it. There's like a lot of like build up to what's going to happen, but then they die pretty quickly.
And it's usually unbeknownst to the characters too. Like I think
Yeah.
the bus is a great example of that. Like she just walks into the street and suddenly bam, just gets hit by a bus out of nowhere. In Saw, you're watching these people suffer for a good couple of minutes before, it happens or it doesn't. So I think that's a big difference here too. It's a little more shocking. And that's something that I think is in this franchise's corner that may not be in the Saw corner, which is interesting. I don't know. I've always really appreciated that about Final Destination.
I've actually always said Final Destination is my Saw. Like people always like love the traps in Saw and they could talk about them. Like I could talk about these people dying in freak accidents all day.
It's fun to watch the setup too. There's a bit of like dramatic irony in that, where it's like you see it, you're watching it happen. The characters know they're gonna like they might die at some point or might be able to escape it, but you see all the like the dominoes falling essentially. Which there's something fun to that formula. I think all 5 of these movies kind of follow that. So I've seen a big criticism of these films is like it's a bit like formulaic. It's kind of the same thing every time, but that's fun. Like it's a fun formula. I get why they've stuck to it. So I think they captured some lightning in a bottle with this first movie, even if it is a little messier than some of the sequels.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But where does this one ranks for you? I'm just out of curiosity, because this is also not my number one pick.
I would put this in second place.
Second place? Heck yeah. The characters are great in this one, like arguably the best.
That's what I keep coming back to. I really like the opening. I really like the characters. And like it was new at the time, so I always will have like a special place for it, but it's not the best.
Yeah. I definitely feel you there. Two I go between 2 and 5 is my favorite, but I think I'm leaning towards 2 these days, if that makes sense. But what are your thoughts on Final Destination 2?
2 is my favorite. 2 is definitely my most rewatched. It was one where I had like a best friend growing up, and I think I've maybe even said this on your podcast before, but her mom owned like the video store, corner store down the street, and she would let us just take a movie as long as we would like bring it back before the day was over.
Oh, nice.
And we just went on a tear with Final Destination 2. Like we watched it over and over and over. And I think that's why it's my favorite. But I also think it has the best opening premonition scene out of all of them.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's hard to argue that, I think. Final Destination 2's opening is the reason, we were just talking about this off camera, it is absolutely the reason why most people avoid log trucks.
Just get out of the way. Just let them do their thing.
Just get out of the way of that thing. If that thing snaps, you're going just like the cop in this movie. It is hard to watch.
I'd rather exit off the freeway.
Yeah, just get out of the way of that. No way, man. I'll wait a couple of minutes for it to pass. I love the opening of this. It makes you terrified of something that would otherwise just feel so mundane. I feel like not a lot of horror movies hit on that as well as Final Destination does.
Yeah, and it was like every kill in that opening premonition, as like crazy as it looked, it was something that could really happen, which is like what made it scarier. It was, the log coming off, the water bottle going under the brake pedal, which is why like for a long time I wouldn't drive with like water bottles. I would make sure that they were in my cup holder. I wouldn't just have like loose things rolling around.
I have this giant water bottle, which is out of reach right now, but I'm sure you've seen it on the streams. I care every time I go in the car. It's because of this movie that I put it in the back seat.
Yeah.
It's nowhere up front at all. I'm like, if that goes under the gas pedal or the brake or something, I'm dead. Like I'm actually gonna die. That's
Yeah,
can't do it.
every time I watch that opening, I just replay that meme in my head of like emotional damage because it was.
100%, and it looks gorgeous. As personally, I'm a bit of a gore hound, you know. I
Mhm.
love how they mixed practical and CGI. Like that always just results in something that is so beautiful and so fantastic as a horror fan. I love how they used mostly practical with a little touch of the digital, you know, like the logs bouncing on the street or whatever. That's digital. The face on the cop, it was just a dummy or whatever, but they put that on CGI, but it flashes so fast you don't even notice it. I don't know.
It
It's just
looks
excellent.
so good.
Yes, still holds up today in my opinion. I can't say that about the rest of this franchise, but this sequence in particular, absolutely.
And like personally, like one of my worst fears is fire. So when he goes under in his like Firebird and hits that gas tank, but then he's still alive trying to get out of the car, it's just like such a visceral reaction. It's horrifying.
And the attention to detail, like I mean, like you were just saying, Firebird. You know what ends up happening to him? The school bus is the same school as the previous movie. It's like, whoa, what a crazy connection there is there. I don't know. I'm going to criticize a movie coming up for forcing a connection to the original film, but this movie I think does it really well for the most part.
I like it too because right from like the intro when she's like asleep and the TV is like playing the interview and it's like, okay, we've established that like people know about this. This was like a phenomenon that happened. So we're like living in a universe already where this is like plausible and connected. So I
Yeah.
appreciated that. I also like how there are some like obvious Easter eggs, but then like less obvious little nods. Like I would say like the school bus was less obvious, but then you see, like exit 180, and if you're not
Right.
as familiar, you'll still get those like connections.
Flight 180 from the original, and that comes
Yeah.
up a lot in the franchise too, like that number in particular. I do say I will say it's very commendable how this franchise is like does have this like crazy inner web of everything connecting and tying back to that original film. It's fun. There are some movies where it doesn't work, but two, it mostly works. The only thing that I'm not crazy about is that there's some characters that were supposed to die or whatever because of the Flight 180 thing or whatever, but like if it would have exploded and everyone would have died, these characters would have died because of like other out of like crazy circumstances. It's a bit of a stretch. This is something they introduced, I think, like in the end of the second act, I want to say, when all the characters are like talking.
Yeah, they're in the
It doesn't work for
car
me.
on the way to the hospital to see if she had her baby, and they're all talking. It just like gets randomly brought up, and they're all telling their stories about how they should have been in their place. And so I kind of like that. I do agree that it is kind of a stretch, but like if you watch like 1, 2 back to back, it flows really well. So I like it.
Tone, yeah, in a sense of tone too. I think the first two movies feel like this nice duology where like 3, 4, and 5 all kind of feel like their own things.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel you there. I think what's so scary about the alternative is just this could happen to anybody. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You could just randomly have a premonition and beat death, but it's still coming for you. So for me, I feel like it dampens that idea a little bit, but it's fun if you're a fan of the franchise looking for these Easter eggs throughout the movies, because there's something in every film that connects it back to the original flight, you know? So I think that's fun.
That's another reason why I know we had talked earlier off like camera about how Devon Sawa didn't return, but it felt also like maybe they thought they were just going to do 1 and 2 because they did kind of close a lot of loops by like having the people who should have died die, and just like it looks like it was supposed to be just that bundle, and then they were like, okay, where do we go from here?
They're like, wow, we're making so much money, we got to make a 3. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, without a doubt, that was absolutely the case. I think my other thing about 2 is that even though it kind of has a somewhat happier ending than the previous film, arguably, it's a darker movie in my opinion, which is why I think I really like it. That ending sequence, like that stinger blow up with the grill and stuff, is like horrifying. It's like, it's campy, but it's like the dude's like limb cooked lands on the table, like right in front of some of the characters at the end. I love that.
And yeah, like it's weird because I didn't find that gory at all. Like I think they handled like it so well. There's like just enough camp that like even if you don't like gore, I think you would really like these movies.
I will say though, there is an ultra gory kill with little Timmy, who gets the the glass. I don't want to call him little
Oh,
Timmy. He's just ambiguously aged. He gets the glass smashed on him, and it's like one of my favorite kills in a movie just ever across the board. That is
just
so disgusting.
geyser of blood.
It's a fantastic kill, and it kind of comes out of nowhere too. You see that it's once again going back to the dominoes falling. You're watching that all happening, but it hits at a surprising moment, and it's just like the bus scene in the first one. It's a bit of a shock.
And actually that kind of like ties in really well to my next point was like I think 1, 2, and 3 handled like looking for the signs the best. I think 1 and 2 were like ambiguous enough. Whereas you start to get into some of the later sequels when you're just like, okay, you're just showing me what's going to happen. I liked when they had to kind of figure it out. Like they're just running and screaming at like little Timmy for about these pigeons, but like we don't know what the pigeons mean. And then boom.
And then that happens, right? It's upsetting. It's fun. I think it's the reason why we like watching slasher movies. You know, there's a part of our brain that knows what's going to happen, but it's like, when is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? You know, like I think that's the intrigue. That's why we keep coming back to these movies, even though, yeah, they might follow a similar formula. That's why I'm like, Final Destination 6, bring it on. Like if they're able to do something like this, I'm so down for it. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun to go through those motions, even if they are familiar.
For sure.
Absolutely. I think it would also be just a mistake to not mention Tony Todd, who is a fantastic in these first two movies. In the kind of like, I don't want to call it a cameo performance, but I mean he's in it so little, but affects it so much, in my opinion. Oh, so good.
The one thing that does it makes me laugh every time is just the tone shift from 1 to 2 for Tony Todd. Like in the first one, he's just like a coroner, he's a medical examiner, he's there doing his thing. In 2, we're like in a crypt, there's smoke, he's like his voice is booming. It's great. I still love it though.
He's like the harbinger of death or whatever in the second one, even
Yeah.
creepier than his appearance in the first movie. I just found this out today, but he's in the third one. He voices the devil, like that that's above the
roller
ride.
coaster devil head. Yeah.
I never knew that. Like, blew my mind. I've been saying for years, I'm like, I wish Tony Todd was in 3 and 4. He's in 3. His voice, at the very least, it's something.
I'm glad he wasn't in 4.
I think that was the right move.
Forget about 4.
Yeah, that was. I think that was the right move for old Tony Todd there. But I really do enjoy him in these first two movies, especially. I'm glad he has a little voice role or whatever in 3, but he's exceptional here. I will say this is Final Destination 2 is where we get into the overcomplicated connections and how like death is working backwards and stuff. You said you kind of like this though.
I did. I like it because it doesn't seem as random. I kind of liked that there was a plan, and then you're like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? Because then it's like, if there is a plan, we actually may be able to beat it. So I thought it was kind of cool, but I agree that now that there's more than 2, it kind of pigeonholed them to go a certain way.
Because I think watching 3, 4, and 5 again, I'm thinking to myself, well, now you know that idea of like that glimmer of hope, which is what they're going for there. It's almost muddied because it's so messy and inconsistent between movies. But I do like it. I do like it in 2 for the most part. But I think it's because of the existence of 3 in the Final Destination that like kind of ruins it for me a little bit. Yeah.
No, totally agree. If it was just 1 and 2, I think it would have worked perfectly. It looks a little messy now because we have 3 other movies.
Yeah, right. But I do agree, like that glimmer of hope is so important. If you don't have that, there's no tension, like, so it's an important factor there. You got to like have some hope for your characters to maybe get out of it. And I think it's kind of fun that 1 and 2 pose different solutions of how to get out. You got to replace life where death was, or whatever they're trying to explain. I like that. That's fun.
Yeah.
But then that gets real messy in 3, where we're trying to save, like we're saving people, we're pushing people out of the way of things and stuff. There's an entire third act sequence, which is just insanity. But what are your thoughts on this film overall?
3 is fun. It's like, upper middle of the pack for me. I just thought it was just a solid entry. I I don't like it as much as two. I don't think I'll like any of them as much as two, but it's like right there with one for like second, third place. Um, I thought that it was like really, it was kind of a strange pace. I'm trying to remember it. It's been like a couple months since I've seen them all, but I remember thinking like the funeral scene was kind of drawn out. I thought some of the character choices were like a little weird. Like I don't like that the one guy McKinley goes on this like
Yeah.
vengeance arc. Like they made some weird choices, but I really enjoyed the kills and I enjoyed the premonitions. Like I really liked the aspect with the photos because that was the thing. She was there that night taking all of the photos, and then she's seeing them developed, and she's trying to figure out based on like the clue in the photo, like who's gonna die next, what is their kill gonna be like. So I really liked that part of it. So it kind of evened out the things I didn't like so much.
This is a big positive again in Final Destination's corner. I mean, yes, you know, there's the argument, are these formulaic? Do they flow the same way as the last one? Sure, but they do it differently. They're very inventive with each movie. It might not, you know, I'm not going to go so far as to say like, oh, it's like every movie gets better than the last one, but they find new ways to tell a similar story. And I really appreciate that attention to detail. There's that in most of these movies. 4 not so much, but 1, 2, and 3 especially. Like I think they always find a different and creative way to, you know, give you the clues. It's not just the same thing every single time, and I really appreciate that. It same goes with the kills, the practical effects. You know, they're always blending, except for 4, practical with digital, and that's so important, I think, especially with this roller coaster sequence, which may pale in comparison to, you know, the second movie's intro, but I have some nostalgia for that. Like when I was a kid, I saw that commercial of the people dying on the roller coaster. I'm like, I'm never going to Cedar Point again. Screw that. That's way too scary.
I am haunted by the tanning bed scene. Haunted. I just, that is probably my least, yeah, that's my least favorite death in I think any of the Final Destination movies. There's a couple in 5 that are close, but for 3, that's the one that like sticks out for me.
Oh, without a doubt. That is so brutal. Like, and I think the thing about it too is these characters might suck, but they're like on fire, trapped in these tanning beds. Like that situation is one of the worst that has ever been created in all 5 of these movies.
And it's like, it's funny because out of like all of them, when I watch 3, I find myself like rooting for them. I'm like, maybe it won't happen. I'm like, even though I've seen this 100 times, I'm like, maybe the tanning lotion will stop. Like maybe they'll be fine.
This time they're going to be fine. I promise. It's going to happen. There's also the most hilarious match cut that I've ever seen in a movie ever, where it's like them. And of course they're right next to each other. It's like, what? That's so funny. Like that. I'm glad like all of these movies, and I'll even rope 4 into this, like you can tell they're always having fun making these movies at the very least, you know, like I'll give them that.
That gets me every time. It's like the 2 white tanning beds, flames coming out, 2 coffins.
So fun, like just a hilarious editing choice right there. That's I think so many people will say like, you know, like the movie was good, it was fine, whatever, but like editing is such an important thing about films. Like you can make something so stand out just like in post, you know, even beyond what you did filming. And this is a great example of that in my opinion. So a very big bright spot in this movie that, like you said, is maybe a little more meh compared to the other 2.
Yeah. And it's like I don't have really like a lot to say about this movie, but that's not necessarily like a bad thing. I think it was just like a solid entry.
Yeah, it's a little forgettable. Like you said, some of the characters are like, this is where we really start to get to the point where the characters kind of suck. You know, like 4 is the prime example of that, but like a lot of the side characters in this one are just like kind of like gross. They're like, some of them are pervs, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I think, is the only one that really shines, in my opinion. Yeah. Who she's, you know, super consistent in everything she's in, I think. So she was good, but some of the other characters is just like, okay, we're getting into like old school 80s side characters that we hated them back then. Why are we doing this now in the thousands?
Was it Ricky? Ricky, I think his name was, the greaseball.
With the camera, right? Like,
yes.
I hate him. Like, I'm like, just die, dude.
Even though like the girls suck, I kind of loved them because after the accident they like were genuinely trying to be nice. Like they thought they were being nice. They're like, "Hey, like her boyfriend died. Like see if she wants to come tanning with us." Like it was like it was so precious. They were trying. It's
They
like I
had
know
more
people like that. They were trying.
they had more layers to their character opposed to just I'm an asshole. You know what I mean? So it's like I
Yeah.
appreciated that. There's a little bit of effort there, and it's something. But moving into the best Final Destination movie, the Final Destination, with with some of the best characters in horror history. Thoughts, Sarah?
It is so bad. It was also so forgettable. It's like every time I'm watching it for the first time and I never like it. Like it's the characters are forgettable. The one plus that I will give it is I did enjoy the opening premonition. I thought like the racetrack was like a fun setting. A lot of things could go wrong. That was cool. But like the CGI was so over the top that it just like completely took me out of it. Was it supposed to be 3D? Because I feel like it's shot like it was 3D, but I didn't see it in theaters. It just was it was bad. Like we can get into it more, but like the premonitions were bad. The kills were kind of boring. The CG was bad. Like, what was the story? The weird, like, flashes of like x rays that were happening. Like, it was just a mess. Like, it was one big mess.
It really is. And like just to touch on something there, the CGI, I think like I don't even know like what happened. Like the previous three movies, say what you want about these films, they really tried in the department of practical mixed with a little bit of digital, because I don't know how you could have done everything in those last three movies practically. You couldn't. They did as much as they possibly could with practical effects. Commendable, incredible. Like some of this stuff will stand the test of time, especially too, in my opinion. But
Yep.
like my thing with this movie is it's mostly CGI. Like there's hardly any real good practical effects that stand out. I mean, even some of the bigger sequence from this movie did not age well, in my opinion. Like the pool scene is just like, ugh, it's hard to watch. It's just like, this is so gross. It's so digital. It looks like something that like an eighth grader did in iMovie.
I think the only like kill that gave me any kind of tension at all was when the woman was getting her hair cut with the scissors. And like the chair kept dropping. That was the only time that I was just like, ooh, wonder what's gonna happen. The rest I'm like, I couldn't care if they lived or died.
Yeah. The elevator one, I'm like, okay, that's not bad. Or not elevator,
The escalator, yeah,
yeah,
that was
I meant to
boring.
say escalator. That scene, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of something there. There's something kind of gross and nasty there, but for the most part, I just don't care for any of these kills or how this movie flows in particular as well. This is the one where I really felt the exhaustion. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is okay. This is starting to get tired. Like, wow, they're out of
They
ideas.
phoned it in for sure.
It really is a shame. I don't know.
And this one, like the double premonition in like three, I thought they did really well. Like at the end when she's on the like subway, it did not work in this one. I was confused. I was like, but what is happening? Like I genuinely thought it was over. Is this supposed to be a twist? Like it's just not working for me.
That was something I wanted to bring up too, like what your thoughts are on like the double premonition, because that's something I don't know if it works for me in either movie. Like that's something in 3 too that they reshot the ending of that film, because it ended right when what's his face, Winchester McKinley. Why did I say Winchester? That dude like gets hit with the thing or whatever, he explodes into blood. That was the end of the movie
Oh,
originally
I
in
didn't know
3.
that.
Yeah, and then it cuts to the subway stuff. So that was something they tacked on because they felt that the movie ended too abruptly. So they
Okay.
wanted to give you like a stinger sequence or whatever. But you kind of you like that in 3, not crazy about it in 4.
Yeah, it did not work at all for me in four. In three, I thought it was fine. I thought it was a cool ending.
It feels like it's filler in 4. Like it cuts back to what feels like a very random scene where the one dude gets like dies. He gets hit by the bus, which they're doing again for some reason in this movie. Why does it cut back to that? Like what? I don't know. It just feels like they're trying to extend this movie to make it longer. Is how it comes off.
Yeah, it feels like they literally didn't know how to end it. And they're like, well, what did three do? Let's try to do
Just
that, but better.
they just watch the movie again, start taking notes. They're like, "Oh, okay, let's run it. Let's make let's make that happen." But I will say, I think the idea of like a Final Destination style event happening at a theater is like, it's kind of cool. Is it tacky? Absolutely. But it's like, you're going to be watching this movie in a theater, you know, when it comes out or whatever. Okay, let's put the audience like literally in the movie. That's okay. It's fun. Whatever. I'll give them that. But that's one of my
Yeah.
only positives for this whole film.
Yeah, if they had like executed it well, that could have been really cool.
I agree. I think just simply better execution instead of spontaneous barrels that just explode sometimes. It's like, you could have done something better there. I think
Yeah.
it's just a little more thought there. This one reminds me of Nightmare 5, where I just feel like you're going through the motions. You know what I mean? You're not really trying to make anything new. It's just, let's just do the same movie that we did previously again.
They didn't even try with the premonitions. They weren't. They were literal visions that was just like flashes of pictures of what was going to happen. It was like fire, nail, escalator blades. It's like, okay.
It's not as like, I think what was so great about the previous three movies is that you had like the idea that something like it was like, oh, we're on a construction site, something's going to happen here, but you don't know exactly what that is. It's that the little build and intrigue and mystery, but then it's like, oh my god, glass comes crashing down on little Timmy. But in this one, yeah, like you said, it's exactly, you know exactly what's going to happen before it even does.
And even the movies where like the premonitions were like a little more obvious, like in the first one when Clear sees like the bus in the window, it was like done so well that it didn't like bother me, because it's like, okay, she saw a bus, or did she see a bus? Was it there? Was it not? Who's gonna get hit by the bus and when? Like, it was good.
It raises a lot of questions. 4 doesn't. Yeah, precisely. Like, yeah, no, I totally feel you on this one. I think that this was just a very weird misfire in an otherwise very consistent franchise. Like, 5 picks it up, in my opinion. This is like
Yeah.
the best one out of the last 3, in my opinion, personally.
Yeah, 4 just, the one thing that I will say about 4 is I'm glad they didn't like make any real connections, because you can marathon the franchise and just not include 4 and it doesn't mess up anything.
That is, yeah, that's actually a really good point. There's not too many connections to any of the other films here, but 5 kind of gets back to that in a great way, which I love. What are your thoughts on this one, which definitely takes a bit of an ambitious swing where the other ones don't? What are your thoughts on 5?
I really like 5. Like, it's up there. 5 and 3 kind of go back and forth depending on my mood, because I didn't really love the characters in 5, but I really liked the movie. I did not see like the prequel aspect coming, which in retrospect I should have. They were dropping clues like the whole time, but I think like honestly, it had been so long since I had even watched a Final Destination movie, and then like 5 came out, that I wasn't like picking up on it. And now you watch it and you're like, oh, they're using flip phones. No one really says what day it is. The clothing is dated, but I kind of just chalk that up to like movie wardrobe. He's going to Paris. Like, come on. Like, I should have seen it coming. And when it was like revealed at the end, jaw dropped. I was gooped, gagged, surprised. I was just like, this is great.
It is like I don't know, it's just a wonderful tragedy. I don't know, there's something about it, like when he comes to the realization, he's just like, no, and you're just like, oh fuck, you know, there's something about it that's just so upsetting, because they thought they won, and you're really rooting for these guys too, because they do this secondary antagonist thing really well here, where they might not have done that so well in 3. They tried to do it in 3, they recycled the idea here, and I think they do it much better, in my opinion, with the Miles Fisher's character.
I agree. I like the whole, like, if I take your life, it takes my turn. I think that works better than the, like, saving someone, skipping them kind of thing.
I think it's more intense, right?
Yeah, I think it works for him because he was just, he gave villain vibes the whole movie. Whereas the other guy, it was a switch, and I was like, I didn't see this coming.
Yeah, he was just kind of a weirdo in 3. That dude, and where I think Miles Fisher is just a better setup for a villain, just overall, because he is like a little more mundane at the beginning with like an evil streak, but then it builds towards the ending. I love it. I think this one is just a much better execution of 3 in a weird way. But I don't know, that twist like just hit me like a truck, or I guess a bus.
Right? And like it bothers it's like I should have seen it. And it drives me crazy because the whole movie I was even saying like, why aren't they mentioning like 180? Like, why haven't they like Googled like what happened? Because in like honestly, I don't remember if they really looked it up in four or it's kind of a blur, but for the rest of the movies, there's always some tying it back. So in five, I just chalked it up to like, oh, this is just another installment. We're just gonna go through the motions here. It's a good movie. And then it was great.
I feel like, and once again, this is like, I just watched these movies. I should know this a little better off the top of my head. But like 3 and 4, I feel like both of them have essentially the same scene where they're like, yeah, this happened with Flight 180 like years ago or whatever. And it's just like, okay, we got it. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
We're all in the same franchise. Cool. But 5, yeah, you don't get that. And I think that's why it sticks out so much from all of these movies. It has a different flow. It's maybe, yes, it has the same like build up. You're seeing things happen before they do, but that's especially something that's in this movie's corner as a positive for just standing out, just not doing the same thing as the last 2 films, which is nice. But the kills, I think, are especially pretty good in Final Destination 5. Well, what's your favorite one though?
The one that sticks out to me is in the opening premonition, which I love in this movie. And it's when he's not the bus driver, but he's like the main boss. I can't think of the actor's name. He's the one that's in like the comedies all the time.
David Cockner or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
he gets the oil on him. Can you imagine hanging off of a bridge and just having piping hot oil just spilled on you?
I think about like when I'm cooking something, you know, and like I just burn my finger a little bit like that, but your entire body.
If I like light a candle with a match and the flame gets too close to me, I'm not having a good time. So like, I can't imagine what it would be. I just anything to do with burns freak me out.
Oh yeah, that one's especially gross, and I don't know. Like they did an excellent job with this opening scene again. I'm gonna get up on this maybe controversial soapbox and say nothing's ever going to top the second movie's opening, but if anything comes close, might be Final Destination 5. I love this whole bridge sequence, which once again mixing practical with CGI. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna stop talking about how much I love that from this franchise.
No, 2 is, in my opinion, the best opening. This rivals it. Like when you look back, 1 is very simple and so is 3, but like 1 gets away with it because it was like the first one. But no, 5's opening is great, but I think like the other kill that stands out, like the goofiest one, is the acupuncture one.
Yeah, that one's pretty funny. I think the only thing that's disappointing about that one is that he dies because the Buddha statue or whatever falls on his head. And I'm like, I kind of wanted some needles to go through more parts of this dude's body. I don't know. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but that's kind of what I was hoping for with that one.
It just, they make him into like such a jerk that you're just like so excited to see how he dies.
Because you know it's coming. I mean, he's you know, once again, here's your resident creep character that for some reason these sequels need to have. Of course he's gonna die, but I just wish it was a little more had to do with more of the things at the massage parlor versus just a statue falling on someone's head. I feel like we've seen that before, you know. Yeah. But I do love the needles in the chest when he like gets up after falling down. It's like, ooh, that's hard to watch.
Oof, I know, I can't. Oof, it was kind of similar to the tanning bed scene for me. In 2, like it just, or in 3, there are parallels. That's the thing that kind of not took me out of this movie because I was like invested, but there were some things in this movie that I just felt were like a little underwhelming, and I don't love the characters, which is why I kind of struggle putting this one like above 3. It's like I enjoyed 3 more, but like the twist at the end of this one, I think sometimes propels it over. But like I found the main character, he was so whiny. I didn't like this weird relationship thing that was happening. It's like, go to Paris, don't go to Paris. Like, dude, I don't care. Make up your mind. Like, get a grip. Like, figure your life out.
I think my thing about this one that I do like, I agree with you about the characters. Most of the sequels kind of failed to capture my attention with some of these people. They just feel a little generic, but I like the situation just being different from the previous couple of films. Like 3 is essentially a similar situation to 1. You know what I mean? I like that this is like, here's a group of coworkers for the most part. That's fun. That's different. It's not like my favorite thing ever, you know, not my favorite story to tell, but at least it's something different. It's a different group of people dealing with the same idea. So it's like, okay, I give him props for that. I also, Miles Fisher's character is like one of my favorite characters in this entire franchise. I love how evil he is. I don't want to, you know, we already covered that, but he's a big standout to me, even if some of your side characters are pretty generic. But two of the kills that stand out to me personally that have like just been trapped in my brain ever since I saw them is the laser in the eye, which is like, nope, fuck that. I'm never getting LASIX ever because of this movie. And the gymnastics one as well, where the girl like breaks her back.
Yeah, that one,
Brutal.
I would say, out of all of them, that one was the most tension because I'm like, when is she going to step on that screw?
Yes.
I was like, that's my nightmare. And then we didn't go that way at all.
Yeah, right? Like we were talking about this earlier, but a great misdirection to like lead you in one direction, but then just goes a totally different path. And it's still just as fucked up, thankfully.
But I will say, it's so tough to rank them because depending on my day, I could like different ones. But I do think that this one like gave us more than 3 was giving. Like at least they tried to be creative with this one. The kills were different. There was a lot more going on. Like this is probably like the opening premonition that had like the most stuff just like thrown into it. And I loved that.
For a while, this one was my favorite, but I think I definitely like 1 and 2 more than this one after just, you know, rewatching them a couple of times. I'm so all over the place. I just love horror movies. You know, it's a problem. It's tough. It's really tough for me to rank this one too. But if you had to, if you were like, oh, I got to rank the Final Destination movies, how would you rank all 5 of these so far?
2, 1, 3, 5, 4 is my like gut instinct, but it could be 2, 1, 5, 3, 4. 2 and 1 are always going to be the same. 4 is always going to be the worst. 3 and 5 kind of dance in the middle depending on my mood.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think 3 and 5 pretty interchangeable. They both have some really big positive qualities, but I think nothing beats 2 and 1. You know.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, though, we do have another one on the horizon. We have part 6 coming out hopefully next year, maybe, you know, even longer. What are your thoughts about this one? Are you excited for another entry?
I am. I'll always go see them if they keep making them. I haven't heard any like confirmed information on what's happening, but there are a lot of theories that it's going to be like Tony Todd based. And I am like down for that. Is it William Blood something?
Yeah.
I'm like down. I have reservations though, because I don't know if I want to know exactly what he is. But like I loved having him in there. And I feel like if they give us like a definite answer to like his role, it could like change how we think about some of the movies or completely change if they have to make any more in the future. So I like that he's kind of like ambiguous. We're all like, he's kind of like Death. Is he Death? Is he just working for Death? Like, I like that we don't know, but of course I want more Tony Todd. So I'm conflicted.
Wow. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like, you took the words right out of my mouth. I love Tony Todd in all of these movies. He's fantastic. But I don't want to know exactly what he's got going on. You know, what is his situation? That's the best part is us being able to talk about that, I think. So I don't want that clearly defined, but if you want to bring him back for another movie, you know, and a little, I don't know. It's weird. I've heard the same thing where it's like the idea of putting him in the forefront. And I'm like, I love Tony Todd. I would love to see a movie that stars him. But I think what's so great about his appearances in 1 and 2 especially is like it's minimal, but it stands out so much. It makes those movies like, I think, just a step higher because of his little performances in there. So like, will it work if he's essentially like the focal point of an entire film?
Right. The other thing I was hearing was people were hoping that Devon Sawa's like off-screen death in 1 was just like a hoax, that he like faked his death and went like into hiding, similar to how like Clear like put herself in like an institution. If he just like faked his death and went completely off grid, that they could bring him back and have a storyline with like him and Tony Todd. I would love that. I'd be down for that.
See, that's pretty awesome. I kind of want to see that happen. And you wouldn't really have to explain too much of like why maybe in 2, or I guess not in 5 because that's technically a prequel. Just like why he didn't mention it. You know, you wouldn't really have to explain it. Maybe you could say that that's how he, you know, that this is the side story of how he died. Maybe it takes place in between like 1 and 2 or something, or maybe at the same time. So that could be fun. I'm into that for sure.
Yeah, I don't want him completely explained, but I want more time with him. So I'm excited for 6.
I do like that he's always just on the outside of this. You know, that's I think that's part of the fun. It's like he's never actually in the way of danger, but he somehow knows a lot about this. It's like, what? You know?
And I love that they kind of like called it out in 5 because she's like, "Why are you following us?" He's like, "It's literally my job." And then you see like the medical examiner van.
It's just so badass. Like I just love Tony Todd. I love Tony Todd in these movies so much. He's so scary. Like, oh, more Tony Todd and more horror movies. That's what I've come down to from this podcast. But yes, excitement for 6 is on a high. I'm very excited for this film. I hope it's good. It's coming from our boy Guy Busick, who just wrote the last 2 Scream movies. So I'm wishing him nothing but good luck. There's a lot of writers and a bunch of people attached to this project. I just hope it's good, whatever it is. That stands up to most of these other movies.
Exactly. Just don't ruin like the legacy. Like it's sad that these days that's kind of all I'm worried about. It's just so many people are coming out with like reboots and remakes and sequels, and they're just like coming in half baked, just wanting to like attach themselves to a franchise and end up just like ruining the legacy of that franchise. And it's so upsetting.
It happens far too often. I think it sucks that the majority of these sequels, that's how we go into them. Because, like, I'm going to say like 7 times out of 10, they're just not up to par. But there's that, 30% where it's like, oh, okay, these are actually fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that's not what happens with Final Destination. I hope that this is something special, just like how 5 was a bit of a comeback. Maybe they could do the same thing with 6.
I agree. I'm hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic.
We have Toy Story 5 coming out next year apparently. So I'm just like, what is even going on anymore? Like we're just doing we're just making continuations to everything, even if it just makes absolutely no sense, So I don't know. But I'm scared. I'm hoping for more original horror next year, but I'm excited for Final Destination 6 whenever it comes out. Sarah, is there anything you want to throw out there about the Final Destination franchise before we get this thing wrapped up?
Ooh. No, I'm sorry, I don't have any like dramatic closing point or like overall opinion. I just think it is like a very consistent, solid franchise. I don't think it gets enough love. And I'm happy that there's like still people watching it and talking about it, and there's enough hype that we get another installment. Maybe it'll like revitalize it.
I love that we're seeing a lot of 90s and like early thousands franchises come back. I think it's a lot of fun. These are
That's where my heart is. My heart is with the like late 90s, early 2000s, because that's where we got the best characters, like honestly. And I know it's controversial. A lot of people get annoyed when I talk about like how much I love the characters because they're like, characters don't matter. We're here to watch people get murdered. I'm like, but if I don't care about them, then it's no fun.
I think you're absolutely right, though. Like, that was such a big step up that had been neglected in like the 80s for the most part, not in every movie, but in some of them, it's just like, okay, we wanted to get to the gross supernatural thing. But it's like, what if we don't care about the characters? The 90s answers that and says like, well, actually, we're going to do some excellent characters in Scream. And then a bunch of movies follow suit. That's great. That's a big improvement on horror. And I think that was something that we lose in a lot of sequels, which unfortunately, I think Final Destination also kind of fell victim to that at a certain point. But if you can really just put so much care into just the simple basics of writing, you can make something that stands the test of time. I will still be watching the first 2 Final Destination films and 5. I'm going to rope that one in there too. Screw it. For years to come, because those characters are so excellent and the kills that they unfortunately receive are so disgusting and brutal, but it's that 1-2 punch. Sometimes you just get the big punch, but it's that little one beforehand. I'm really trying to stretch these motives or metaphors, I should say. But it's very important. The 90s and the thousands do that so well.
And I'm hoping it doesn't fall victim. I think a lot of the stuff we got in like the 2010s, like mid 2010s, were so like hyper focused on like using all the technology to like its max. Like everyone's like, we have all this computing power. Let's like just throw CG into everything. Like let's do the most, and that is just not holding up. So I'm hoping that we don't get a movie where they're just like, we can make everything look so insane because we have like all of this tech that can do this now, and then we get like a 4 again.
I really hope that doesn't happen. Like, keeping my fingers crossed that they approach this next one the way that they did with, like, especially the first 2 movies. That's so necessary, you know? Like, those practical kills being so grounded, well, mostly grounded, and like you were saying earlier, that idea of this could really happen. Like, I want to feel that. I didn't really feel that about Final Destination 4, and that was its biggest, maybe its biggest detriment.
Right? Like, I'm not going to let all of my internal organs get sucked out in a pool. Like, when am I doing that? Like, but no,
couldn't
I
you just
be on the highway with a log truck and die at any moment.
Yeah. Yes. I feel that. I think bringing the mundane back into Final Destination is something that's so important. We've gotten a little fantastical with some of the kills, and just put me in an office building. You know what I mean? Put me in something normal that like most people have to do in their day to day, and make that scary. That was what's so great about 1 and 2, I think.
Yeah. Also, bring back a slight police presence. Like, in some of these movies, like, especially 3, they're just, like, dying left and right. And nobody's paying attention. Like, I liked in the first one, like, if the FBI is investigating Alex, like, of course. He predicted a plane was going to explode. And now all his friends are dying. His bloody footprints are at crime scenes. Like, stuff's going on.
And that makes it scarier too. I mean, not only the threat of death is there, but the threat of like serious jail time. Yeah, right. For something you didn't even do. Like, that's scary. You know what I mean? That adds to the chaos of these movies, which in my opinion makes horror movies all the better.
I agree.
So bring back Agent Shrek back in Final Destination 6. Make it happen. Gotta love that name. But hell yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for doing this podcast with me as always. It is a blast talking with you.
Thank you for having me. I was so excited when you were excited for this topic. I'm like, oh my God, I could talk about these movies forever.
These are so good, and I'm with you on the fact that like they just don't get talked about enough. They don't have enough love. It's up there with Saw for me. Like, I love both of these franchises so much. For, you know, yes, it's got a lot of gore, it's got a lot of fun and crazy kills, but there are also some really good characters here. So I love this franchise, and thanks for bringing the topic.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Hell yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching today's podcast. And as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.